Up next on our Ask Reddit, influencers for SaaS. Has anyone tried this?
Yeah, a couple of clients that I've worked with, I think I mentioned in an earlier segment. We have experimented with B2B influencers. Where my tips there, where I've seen this go wrong, is where people pay for a post. They give you they give the influencer a couple of $1,000s. They go out and post something on behalf of the company, and then they just hope that it creates opportunities and that it creates ROI. Or they sponsor a podcast with influencers that are on the podcast, or whatever the case may be. Where I found this to be most successful is less about the pay structure and more about the relationship, right? And so rather than just like paying people to go out there and tell the world to go try your product, which may work in a B2C setting, in a B2B setting, the relationship is important. What I mean by that is where I found success in running B2B influencer programs is, being able to identify some of those influencers in your space. Most likely they're pretty active on LinkedIn. Or you can go out to your customer base and just ask them, like, hey, who's your go-to? Like, who do you trust for information? And that starts to kind of curate a list of potential partners there, and even looking at your customer base in and of itself. But once you have your list of partners for an influencer program, being able to create that relationship where you're putting the product in front of them. You almost create like a advisory council, more than an influencer program, where you're keeping them up to date on the things that are being released from a product standpoint, and in that way arming them with all this great content where they can go out and say, hey, I got a sneak peek of this thing from XYZ company. It's amazing. Here's what it does. Here's how you can get your hands on it. And now it's less about like, hey, I really like these guys over at XYZ company, go try them out. And more about, hey, like, I've seen this, I've given feedback on this. I'm part of this advisory council. Go try it out. And really incentivizing based off of the closed won opportunities. What are the deals, like comping off of deals that actually close? Whatever percentage makes sense. I generally look at what's the general cost of a marketing sourced, closed won opportunity. And that's the amount that I generally allocate to those kinds of programs. But it may vary company to company.
Yeah. On a theoretical level, it's really interesting thinking about like the role of the influencer and the relationship between the potential buyer and the brand, because really the influencer kind of personifies both to the other. So if we think about, if I'm a brand and I have a strong perspective, I probably want to find an influencer with a similar perspective so that we're pretty well aligned on that. And there's a high likelihood that their followers will have a similar perspective. So I think there's quite a bit of alignment between all of those. But going the other direction, like the influencer is going to want to protect their own personal brand and protecting their audience from businesses basically taking advantage of the relationship. How have you, I mean, I don't have quite as much experience in this. Like, what are some good examples of like SaaS or other B2B influencers that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. Without giving out any names, where I've seen this work in companies that I've worked with, or we've partnered with a podcaster, who is generally, like you said, generally aligned with what our take on that particular subject is, and in that way, there is kind of this like back and forth. We have a great reputation, which certainly helps in gaining the trust of the influencer. But understanding the means that podcaster has to be able to distribute the message was really important. And so that's where I've seen it really work, is somebody who is in tune with your space, not just somebody who generally has a strong following, but somebody who has maybe a smaller following, but it's more specialized into the type of product or solution that you actually offer. That's kind of the approach that we've taken, is who has a smaller audience but more impactful, but also is aligned with how we feel about the topic at hand.
All right. So thinking again through this as a potential opportunity for a marketing team, how should they go about um, evaluating the influencer market and perhaps the overall course of setting up not only the deal but the campaign?
Yeah. So the approach first is you got to like I said, you got to curate kind of a list of potentials. Working with your customer success department or whomever's in charge of that relationship to identify from your customer base like who they go to and who they trust. That'll give you a really good starting point. But then looking at generally we break influencers into three categories. You have the big like macro influencers that have hundreds of thousands of connections on LinkedIn or wherever, followers that speak about topics generally, and also have a wide varying base of followers that aren't necessarily passionate about one specific topic. Sweet spot we try to focus on are kind of the medium tier of influencer that might have anywhere from 2,500 followers to 10,000 followers, but they speak passionately about the particular topic that we're in the business to solve, and so that alignment's created, and they're relatively knowledgeable about what we do, and that makes their endorsement a little bit easier. And then there's like the smaller like micro influencer, kind of that under 2,500 is how we generally classify those. That you don't want to like necessarily cast off. That's kind of our second tier that we like to focus on, because they may be up and coming. They may have even like a tighter knit group that really leans on them for advice. But once you kind of have that set up, that list curated, being able to reach out, whether it's through LinkedIn or email or through a mutual contact, particularly if your customers are connected in that way, to make an introduction, and having a conversation about the vision behind why you're looking at that partnership. Looking at like, hey, we're closely aligned, explaining how your values line up, and how you value them in terms of another voice that can talk about the message that you've got to share. From there, being able to work out the details of, hey, this is what we generally offer per closed one deal. Here is, from your base, here is the typical deal size that you would be able to expect, and so every deal is going to turn out about this amount of money. So they kind of see like the carrot, what's in it for them. And then going through and just explaining, like making sure you have a solid program set up where they're more bought in than just like getting on a LinkedIn video and saying, "Hey guys, go buy this product." Like we mentioned, like having them really bought into your product development process, giving feedback about things that you're thinking about, or leaning on them to tell you like what market trends are emerging, and then being able to follow up with the output and say like, here's kind of the feedback you gave, here's kind of the output, here's the product or feature enhancement we're releasing, and giving them kind of that first look, to be able to speak about that. So having that solid program set up, being able to explain what that program looks like, painting the vision of like what that relationship's going to be like for them, and then being able to instill in them the trust in your product, having some case studies, some testimonials, examples of how your product really is impacting your customer base and helping them solve their problems, should excite the influencer as well to say, hey, this is a great product. My base is likely struggling with the same kind of issue, and so it creates that buy-in from that front as well.
So we've mostly been talking about social influencers. I don't know if this exists. Is there such thing as a dark social influencer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the emergence of, and these are tougher to find, but certainly with the emergence of like Slack communities and even email groups and things like that, peer groups, it certainly exists. I for one have not had a lot of success in breaking through into those types of influencers. But I'm sure that's going to become even more and more important to solve.
Yeah. Cool. I think we could mark that one as answered.